Good evening. So thankful that you've chosen to join me for another Bible study on this Sunday evening. I hope you've had a blessed Lord's Day. I hope you had the opportunity to remember the sacrifice that our Lord made for us, as we as Christians are instructed to do every first day of the week until our Lord eventually returns. We're engaged in a study of the Gospel of John, and we're up to John chapter 6. John chapter 5 was kind of a transition chapter. Transition to Jesus giving testimony of himself. And in a sense, John chapter 6 and the chapters remaining will be that kind of thing. It's Jesus' testimony of himself. He'll do a lot of dialogues, but they'll come out of situations. Remember in John chapter 5, that dialogue that he had with the Jews came about as a result of Jesus healing a man who had been lame for 38 years, but doing it on the Sabbath day. Here in John chapter 6, we have this great chapter that really comes down to Jesus using this opportunity by feeding a great multitude of people. Using that opportunity then to teach them that he's the bread of life. That unless you eat his flesh and drink his blood, you just don't have any life in you. They misunderstood that. They thought he was talking about his physical flesh, his physical blood, when Jesus was talking about himself, his person, taking him all in and it being all of him, all about him. They misunderstood that, and many turned away because of that. We'll not have time to talk about that in great detail. Does it fit the scope of what I'm trying to do in this survey of the Gospel of John? We're up to the fourth sign that Jesus has done, that John has recorded. There have been many others, many others. And we'll even pick up on that here in John chapter 6. But this is the fourth one that John has chosen to record, the fourth of 7. This is number 4. Remember, the first was the turning of water into wine. The second, John tells us about Jesus healing a nobleman's son. Long distance. He doesn't even go. He just tells the nobleman, your son's well. The third one, of course, is that healing of a man who had not walked for 38 years. And Jesus said, arise, take up your bed and walk. And he did. Now we have the fourth of those 7 signs. And I'm just going to really deal with the first 14 verses, basically. I may mention some things out of the rest of the chapter and hope you'll read the rest of the chapter. But I'm just looking at the evidences that John gives us to prove that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. The 6th chapter begins with these words, and after these things, which just tells us that it's after those things that happened in Jerusalem. Jesus has been in Judea. Now Jesus is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. John will say it's also called the Sea of Tiberias. But he's on the eastern side. That's a deserted, a less populated, a more rural area, fewer villages, towns, and major cities, and those kind of things. But it was there was a major route, and the Passover is close. Verse number 4 of John 6 will say, and this area having a major route that leads between the northern areas and Jerusalem, there would have been throngs of people who came along that route, and they'll become involved in this as well as the many people who are at this time following Jesus. But Jesus is on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. It says that a great multitude followed him. Now, why did they follow him? They followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. Uh, Maybe they weren't following him for all the right reasons, but they were following him for a understandable reason. Desperation. The disease, the sick, the lame, the halt, lame. They were coming to Jesus because he offered them hope. And so multitudes were following him. And this Passover is nigh, and this huge multitude, Jesus sees them, and others coming, I'm sure. In verse number 5, it says, when Jesus lifted up his eyes, he saw a great company coming to him. No doubt there were. We'll read that when they counted the men, that there were 5,000 men. Matthew will say in his account of this in Matthew chapter 14, verse number 21, that there were men, not counting the women and children. So there are 5,000 men. You know, where there are men, there are usually women. Where there are men and women, there are usually children. So it's been estimated that, you know, this multitude that was fed could have numbered, 15,000, 20,000. It's a great number. John wants us to see that this great multitude came to Jesus. When Jesus saw them, he said to Philip, "Where can we go buy bread that we might feed these?" No doubt, Philip is thinking to himself, why me? Why are you asking me this question? I don't have the money. In fact, he'll say, we don't have the money. But it says in verse number 6 that the reason Jesus asked this was to prove him, to prove Philip. It says because he Jesus already knew what he would do. So this is the test. Philip doesn't pass the test. Had Philip said, well, Master, we've seen you turn water into wine. We've seen you heal a nobleman's son without even going to the house. We were just there with you in Jerusalem, and we witnessed you heal a heal a lame man who had been lame for 38 years. You can do anything, Lord. Feed them. But instead, Philip doesn't pass the test. Philip answers him and said, 200 pennyworth, that's King James Version, 200 denarii. You may be reading a translation that reads like that. 200 denarii of bread is not sufficient for every one of them, that they may take a little. A denarii, that was a daily wage for a Roman soldier. So 200 denarii, what is that, 8 months? So 8 months' pay. 8 months worth of money wouldn't buy enough to feed this multitude. And if you could buy it, it wouldn't be enough just to give them a little. So we see an impossible situation, a multitude, and not enough money. If you had enough money, you couldn't find enough food to buy it to feed this group. Impossible situation. It's Mark's account, I think, of this. By the way, this is the only one of the miracles of Jesus that are recorded in all 4 of the Gospels. There may be a reason for that. And I'll talk about that in a moment if I can remember. But I believe it's Mark's account that says Jesus told them to go and search out, see what you can find. Well, they found the young lad, a young boy. And in verse number 8, one of Jesus' disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, well, there's a lad here, there's a boy here, And he has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? Isn't that the truth? You know, 5 barley loaves. We usually think of a loaf of bread, but this is probably more like a cracker made out of barley. In fact, some of the translations render it that way because the word can be translated cracker, and it probably is. It's more like a cracker. He's got he's got 5 crackers and 2 small fishes, 2 pickled fish probably, pickled in order so that they could be carried and wouldn't spoil. But what is that among 15,000? Jesus doesn't even answer that. He just says to them, make them sit down. Matthew's account, Matthew chapter 14, says that he made them sit in groups of 50. Jesus is going to provide them with a meal. He's provided them even with a place. He created all things. He's provided them with a place where there is much grass. He even created that grass. John chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 teach us. And so there were numbered about 5,000, as Matthew says, 5,000 men, not counting the women and children who were there. And then verse number 11 is one of those amazing verses to me, just amazing to think about. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to his disciples, and his disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fish as much as they would. Now, Jesus isn't providing them with a full course meal here. He's not providing them a steak and baked potato. This is just a small meal. Barley loaf, fishes. That's what it was. But as Jesus took the loaves, he thanked it. He gave thanks for it. Gave thanks to his Father. That's amazing. We could talk a lot about that. But he gave thanks for that. And then he took it. How did it happen? As he distributed it to the disciples, it just continued to be there. Continued to be there. Continued to be there. This is special bread. This is special bread. I don't know any more about it than just what is written, but I know this. It was it was such a meal that the people wanted more. The next day, they wanted him to feed them again. But I don't know. I imagine they've never tasted barley bread like this. Wow. Aren't these fish great? It's such a great meal. It says that they were filled. The word for filled there is the word that's used for a calf that's been at the trough and has eaten his fill and turns away from the trough. I can't eat another bite. They were filled. The meal probably so good they were stuffing it in the pockets of their robes. It was so good. That's the way Jesus works. And he feeds these people. He feeds this multitude from 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. As I said, this is the only miracle of Jesus as recorded in all 4 accounts. I've wondered about the reasons for that, and I'm not sure I have all the answers. I'm going to give you some answers. It could be because of the nature of this miracle. This miracle is different from any of the other miracles that Jesus has performed so far. Now, he'll feed 4,000 at a later time. He'll do this again. He didn't do this just one time. But up till now, this is a different kind of miracle. I mean, there are some miracles which are restorative. That's the way I'd refer to it. It was restoring health to the nobleman's son, restoring the use of limbs, legs, to the man who had not walked. You'll have a man whose sight is restored. He'll restore or give hearing to the ears and those kind of things. There are some of his miracles that are transformative. the transforming of water into wine. But this is a creative miracle. I mean, he takes this barley loaf and then he begins to create, and he creates enough food to feed this multitude. And he didn't have any trouble doing it. He did it with ease. He could do it again the next day, and he could do it the day after that, and the day after that, the day after that, the day after that. These people realized that. They were ready to take him and make him their king. Anybody that can feed me with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish and could feed this multitude, he can do anything for us. Let's make him our king. Jesus had no problem doing this miracle. He was able to feed this entire multitude and then have his disciples to pick up what was left over. And how much was left over? 12 basketfuls. One for each of the disciples. This is a precise miracle. Jesus didn't make too much. Could he have? He could have. But he knew exactly how much to make. And he made exactly enough to feed this multitude until they were filled. And then exactly enough for each one of his disciples. The magnitude of this miracle, I mean, the immenseness of it, and the nature of it. There are 5,000 men, not counting women and children. And the miracle isn't being done to them. They're a part of the miracle. They're doing the eating. They're involved in this miracle. The results of it. They'll say in verse number 14, then those men, when they had seen the miracle, those 5,000 men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. They thought immediately back to Moses and how that God speaking through Moses said, there'll be another prophet that'll be raised up from among the people which were like unto me. And they thought, this is that prophet. This is that prophet. When verse 15 says, Jesus who knows everything that's going on in a man's heart and in a man's mind, said, Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force and make him their king. He departed again, went into a mountain by himself. So they wanted to make him their king. It had been an opportunity for Jesus to have done that. I mean, if all he was looking for was to have fame and honor and power and authority, here was his opportunity. But that's not what he's all about. We know that. And he'll do some teaching regarding that through the remainder of this chapter. I want to conclude with this. Just a few days later, this is recorded for us in Matthew chapter 14. And in Mark chapter 16, we have an account of Jesus warning his disciples about the leaven of the Pharisees. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Verse number 5 of Matthew chapter 16 says, and when Jesus was come together on the other side, so they go to the other side now, the Sea of Galilee, they had forgotten to take bread with them. Jesus said to them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it's because we have no bread. They're still thinking physical. Jesus is talking to about the leaven of the Pharisees, and they're thinking about physical bread. Listen to what Jesus says to them. Verse number 8, Jesus said, when he perceived what they were saying among themselves, reasoning among themselves, he says, oh, you have little faith. Why reason you among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you not understand? And don't you remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many baskets you took up? How is it that you do not understand that I spake not to you concerning the bread, that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? What poor students they were. And it doesn't get a whole lot better. I mean, even when Jesus is arrested, they're all going to flee. You'd think at least one of them would say, hey guys, wait a minute. We've seen what he can do. Let's stay here. Let's watch what he does. But not a one of them do that. What poor students they were. But I say this to you and me. What poor students we are also of this Jesus of Nazareth. When we wonder, even though he's told us that he loves us, we wonder if he loves us or not. When he said, I'll forgive you, and we wonder, can he really forgive me? When he's promised us, I'll come again to take you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. You think he's really coming back? What poor students we are. I'd encourage you, as I encourage myself, to continue to study about this man, Jesus of Nazareth, who said he was the Son of God. Could he be? He fed 5,000 men, not counting women and children, with 5 small loaves and 2 small fishes. He's the Son of God. We don't have to wonder. I thank you for being with us. Continue to study. I look forward to seeing you again soon. I love you.